चलिए तो स्टार्ट करते हैं आज का सेशन. So let me tell you how we are going to conduct these classes. So format is going to be, we are going to go topic wise. It means like this is your first class of this enrichment. So we are going to talk about political theory. We are going to talk about theory of state. We are going to talk about justice. In each unit, first we are going to talk about what is the weightage, how many questions are asked. Then we are going to learn what are the main questions, main type of questions which are asked from this particular section. And then we are going to hit those questions. So if you want to take maximum benefit out of these sessions, I have an advice for you. Please align your revision schedule along with these classes. This is going to, optimize your efforts. How that is going to optimize? Let me start. For example, our first unit in paper 1 section is political theory. All of you know that, right? Just look at the weightage. In 2020, a 15-mark question was asked. In 2019, 10-mark question was asked. In 2010, 10-mark question was asked, right? It means one question is asked from this particular section, but we cannot take this lightly, right? Because when it comes to merit lists, decision is taken on even 1 mark, right? So when it comes to political theory, these are the type of questions which are asked. Just take a look. What is political theory? Relevance of political theory, decline of political theory, resurgence of political theory, explain, comment, approach. A direct question on approaches of political theory, okay? So when I say decline, it means I'm also talking about crisis in political theory. So when we are going to, cover a particular topic, so we should be very much clear. What are the most important themes? कहाँ से question आते हैं? And you should keep a check whether you are having adequate content as well as structure in your mind to answer these questions or not. For example, like today we are saying we are talking about political theory. So after this lecture, you should keep a check. Just open your notes. Open your practice answers, जो भी अभी तक आपने किए हैं, and check whether you have adequate number of points arranged in a structured manner कि ऐसा question आएगा तो you are going to answer. Whether that arrangement is done in your mind or not. If that arrangement is done, then you can say, okay, it is done. If it is not, then revise it. Okay. And in any point, if you feel that you have deficiency in terms of content, then you are going to ping it. Although we are going to cover all the important themes, but if you feel that one particular theme you are having deficiency in terms of content structure in a good manner, then you are going to ping, okay? And we are going to cover that part also, okay? Although how we have designed this program, from each unit we have analyzed past year question papers and what kind of questions are asked. So these questions are divided into 2 segments. One are those who are going to be discussed in class. Another, those who are going to be raised in test. And then eventually discussed in test discussion session. So by this 2-pronged model, we are going to touch all the major themes which are there in these topics. Okay. First, we are going to talk about trend. Then we are going to talk about the major themes. Then we are going to jump on questions. So these classes are also based on answer writing skill development. It means how you are going to structure the content, how you are going to decide what is to be given in introduction, body and conclusion, and how you need to present, means what to use in subheading, how you need to underline. So that all structure should be done here, okay? And how you can bring analysis and depth in your answer by using, some scholars. Now, the point is, as I move forward, you should just observe what are the elements I am repeating again and again. When I say element of structuring. For example, when it comes to structure, so it is not like you need to be creative every time. The point is, okay, if this is the question, what elements needs to be here? Just identify the keywords, give a short brief in terms of definition. Then what is the context? Context should be clear, and what you are going to elaborate in the body of the answer, that should be given in crisp manner before you jump into the body part. So these kind of element, these kind of templates should be structured in your mind. That is our purpose here. Similarly, take a look on the second unit, theory of state. When it comes to weightage, take a look. In 2020, 10 marker question, 19, 10 marker question, 2018, 20 marker question. Now the point is, when it comes to theory of state, there is overlapping also. It means many times questions from theory of state are now not asked from the raw theory which is mentioned in unit 2. Questions are asked from WPT, means Western political thought, IPT, liberalism, theory of power. So overlapping is there. It means in your revision, you have reached a stage till now, since you have covered the syllabus once or twice, now you are going to interlink things. Overlapping study should be done. Just identify the key kind of questions which are asked from here. Comment on liberal, neoliberal, Marxist, realist, post-colonial, feminist theory of state. So simple question is asked on particular type of theory of state. Okay. Now critical evaluation on monistic and pluralistic theory of state, challenges to sovereignty of state, impact of globalization analyzed. Now, while coming to this third type of question, when a question is asked on impact of globalization, you should not limit yourself to rudimentary kind of expression, which is there in many books and in many notes. You should expand your expression by bringing contemporariness in these answers. If you ask, sir, we are talking about paper 1 section A, that too theory of state. So can we bring contemporary part here? Yes, you should bring contemporary part here. And why I'm saying that? Because through this interlinking, evaluator will be clear, yes, you have understood the actual context of these topics. It's not that you are just cramming the theories, okay? Similarly, when it comes to justice part, just take a look on the trend. A 20 marker question in 2020, 15 marker in 2019, 15 marker in 2018, okay? And these are the questions which are asked from this particular unit. Type of justice, many times question is asked in comparison between two types of justice. So you should know political, social, economic, legal, distributive, procedural, substantive justice. Okay. Rawls theory of justice, as I'm saying ना, जैसे मैं अभी बात कर रहा हूँ, so your mind should work. अच्छा, ये topic मैंने पढ़ा है. I've revised this particular topic, and in this particular topic, yes, I've gone through this. क्या मेरे arguments, मेरा जो content है, that is ready or not? If that is not ready, it means PSIR enrichment program is one opportunity where you are going to align your revision along with these classes. Okay. Rawls theory of justice, it is like the most important pillar of this particular unit. Then criticism of Rawls. So I'm using the criticism of Rawls as a separate heading because questions are directly asked from this criticism only. Okay. Many times questions are not asked about the aspects of Rawls theory of justice. They ask communitarian critique, Nozick's entitlement theory, Amartya Sen's social liberal theory. So that is why we need to be having good kind of content ready with these points. Okay. So this is about the approach which we are going to use in this particular session. Okay. Let's jump into one particular question from political theory. ठीक है, start करते हैं. So when you're starting, just have a pen and paper in front of you. Okay. And in this pen and paper, when you have this pen and paper, so please keep jotting down the important points or keywords. Okay. So it may be possible that you have gone through this political theory multiple times, but when it comes to answering, structuring, using particular argument in minimum words, it is possible that you're going to get some relevant points. Okay. Now, read the question. Examine the fact-value dichotomy in political science. To what extent has post-behavioralism resolved the conflict in the dichotomy? 20 marks. I would say this is a cliche question. Many times question is asked on this particular theme, but language change जाती है. तो इस बार भी ऐसा हो सकता है. You are going to, from this particular unit, paper 1 section A number 1 unit, you are going to find this particular question. लैंग्वेज चेंज हो सकती है. लैंग्वेज क्या क्या हो सकती है मैं बताऊंगा आप, बट आई वांट टू कीप इट सस्पेंस टू चेक व्हाट इज योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग फर्स्ट. ओके. सो इट्स नॉट कि मैं क्वेश्चन डिस्प्ले करूंगा और बस आंसर पे जंप करेंगे. नहीं, हम एक 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 उसमें जो वर्ड है उसको डिस्कस करेंगे और बात करेंगे कि अगर एग्जामिन की जगह कमेंट होता, डिस्कस होता, अगर कीवर्ड में जो कनेक्शन है वो चेंज होता, तो हाउ योर रेस्पॉन्स इज गोइंग टू चेंज. Okay, that's how we are going to build our understanding. Just start. First of all, what is the question directive here? Question word kya hai? Examine. Question word is examine, right? So when the word is examine, it should be clear that it is different from the word elaborate or describe. When the word is elaborate or describe, this particular kind of question directive is used where question is having one particular element to describe or two particular element to describe. यानी कि अगर वो पूछता normative political theory, full stop, discuss. Behavioralist political theory, discuss. Behavioralism as a segment of political theory, discuss. Post behavioralism as a segment of political theory or segment of evolution of political theory, discuss. So उसमें हमें केवल करना क्या है? तो what we do at that particular point, we just remember, okay, what are the key elements or keywords within this? What are the key elements of normative political theory? What are the keywords we remember? What are the keywords we remember from this behavioralism? What were the keywords from post? And we then expand on that. Okay, we mention the keyword, we expand on them, we develop an interlinking. So it means no counter arguments are evaluated if question is just mentioning one keyword and discuss. Okay, here it is a argument, fact value dichotomy in political science. It means when it comes to political science, and political science has political theory, so there was one phase in which theories were built on values. What ought to be, kya hona chahiye. And there was another phase of political science when political theories were built on facts, scientific revolution, right? So this particular question is saying that these two phases or these two segments of political science are opposite to each other. Dichotomy word is used, opposite to each other. So first part is saying you have to examine कि क्या सही में अलग है, whether there is a dichotomy between them, या फिर कुछ parallel part भी है या overlapping part भी है. To what extent has post behavioralism resolved the conflict in dichotomy? And since when we talk about fact based means scientific revolution, we talk about behavioralism, then we talk about value, we talk about normative. So after that we talk about its evolution into post behavioralism. Okay, now since we have many students here who are not understanding this particular question, so let me tell you in a simple manner about the background context kya is question, so that you are in a better position to answer. So देखिए जब हम political science की बात करते हैं, so can we talk about political science without political theory? No, right? And what is the purpose of political theory? To understand the values which shape our politics. Very well said, Vishwajit. Now, so from which chapter, which unit you generally start political science? So after this political theory, many people start with Western political thought, and especially Plato. Means when we talk about Western political thought, we start with Plato. Okay, in Plato we talk about Socrates, right? So Plato was talking about justice, right? Plato was giving his theory of justice, right? So that theory of justice was actually, what is the purpose of that theory of justice? What was the purpose of that theory of philosophy or theory of communism? Plato wanted an ideal state. Plato wanted to shape the reality of Athens through his theory, right? And how reality of Athens is going to change? By shaping the politics of reality, okay? So politics is not just about shaping the institution. Politics is also about shaping the reality, consciousness which people live in, right? That's the broad purpose of political theory. Where was Plato? Plato was in Athens. Athens is in Europe. Where was Aristotle? Again, Aristotle was in Europe. So when we talk about evolution of political theory, we find that from ancient time to medieval time and even to modern time during Hobbes. So you can say before actually Hobbes, what was happening in political science? Political science was loaded with normative aspects, means values, kya hona chahiye. And that is why we find that justice, liberty, equality, these values got matured in Europe. But after World War, there was a demand that this political science, being normative in nature, is devoid of reality. वास्तविकता से बहुत दूर है. They just talk about क्या होना चाहिए. It is justice. It is how this is how our society should go. These are the conception of rights. This is how our society should go. But these political thinkers were talking about क्या होना चाहिए, what ought to be, values which can be beneficial for our society. But some other scholars were of the view that these values are not producing results. We have seen a lot of chaos during interwar period. It means between World War I and World War II and after World War II. So at this juncture, many scholars say that we have to save political science because many people now believe that political science is not a serious discipline. They just talk about ideas, not reality. And that is when fact came into political science. So earlier we were talking about values from Plato, ancient time, medieval time, even to many extent in modern time, because we are talking about World War II. But World War II के बाद एकदम से change ये आया कि now we have to change, we have to shift. So that is when we brought fact-based. When I say fact, it means we talk about empirical methods. When I say empirical methods का मतलब क्या होता है? We conduct experiment. We base our theory on observations, not just values, observations. So when this twist came, so maximum contribution to this fact, introduction of these facts in political science happened in USA, especially through American Political Science Association. And there we saw theories like David Easton gave his principles, in which, we have to conduct experiments, we have to analyze the facts, we have to, be value neutral. So those are the elements. So it means now after World War II, we moved to fact-based theories in political science. But soon, as we moved to 1960s, there was again a crisis. At this point, it was said that we have inclined too much into experiments. We are racing to prove that political science is similar to natural science. Many political thinkers to tell that yes, their theories are correct, their theories are universal. They were similarizing, means they were drawing comparisons with physics. They were drawing comparisons with other scientific disciplines, saying देखिए physics में जैसे gravity का rule होता है, इसी तरीके से देखिए हमारे भी experiments होते हैं political science, because we can predict electoral behavior. We can predict what would be the reaction of general public or some sections on a particular policy. But at this point, political science was fused by concepts of various other disciplines. And it lost the touch of values. Just think yourself. If you're talking about political theory and basing it on some experiments, verification, value neutral, without being biased, don't you think it is actually limiting political science? Because political science also guides society. When someone was talking about concept of rights to the common people, although that was not applicable then, but that concept of rights, which were getting shaped in the times of Locke, in the times of J.S. Mill, don't you think these theories have shaped the modern world? Yes, these theories have shaped the modern world. We take these rights which are bestowed upon us because we are born in India. But these rights got shaped by value-based theory, when J.S. Mill was saying that, when Locke was saying that, so they were postulating certain values कि ऐसा होना चाहिए because this is good. But what was happening between World War II and at the end of World War II, 1960s, we were focusing too much on scientific experiments. So we lost touch with the values. We lost touch with the political science as a guiding light. And that is when we saw another crisis in political science. So first crisis was at the end of World War II, and second crisis was at this 1960s. And that is when we found post behavioralism. Means a behavioralism se bhi kaam nahi chala. We cannot, base our political science just on scientific experiments. We have to move beyond it. And that is when we found fusion of values as well as scientific experiments. So post-behavioralism is fact plus value. But before that, we saw dichotomy also, right? Now, ये तो हमने बात की कि background क्या है, story क्या है इस question. Point is, in what ways this question can be asked in UPSC? One is in front of you. UPSC can also say political science as a discipline is evolved through crisis. Comment. So when this question is raised, it means here also you need to talk about normative theory, behavioral theory, and then post-behavioral approach. Normative approach, then your behavioral approach, then post-behavioral approach. Because between these, we found the crisis. Okay. Now, what other way this question can be asked? They can also ask this particular question in segmented way, like I shared, a direct question and talking about discuss. Okay. Now the point is, if question is saying examine, and you have understood, yes, there's a dichotomy between fact and value, but what should be included in introduction? So keep in mind, if question is 20 marks, okay, and you should start practicing with the answer sheet format, which you are going to get in actual mains. Okay, for practicing, what you can do on your A4 size paper, you can have a 1-inch margin on all sides, and between this you need to write. Okay, why I'm saying that? Because you need to practice. If question is of 20 marks, it means you should restrict your answer till 2.5 page, not beyond that. Okay, 2.5 is also on liberal side, considering you have fairly, letter size. Okay. Now, second point is, this is going to help you save a lot of time. ठीक है, क्योंकि अगर आपने word limit को extend किया तो actually कोई question आपका छूटने वाला है. Some question is going to, leave behind. वो हम नहीं कर सकते, right? Now, when it comes to introduction, तो total words कितने हम use करें introduction? So if it is a 20 marker and considering that you are answering in 220 words, okay, 220 words. So we can say that your introduction should not be more than 20% of the total word limit. 20% is on the upper side. You should try to restrict it within 10 to 15%. So if it is 220 words, it means introduction word would be around 44 words, right? 44 words. Now, ये तो हुआ कि introduction कितने words में लिखना. Now, point is, what elements should be there in introduction? Just look at what are the keywords. Fact, value, dichotomy. It means you need to talk about dichotomy. You need to talk about fact. You need to talk about value. So when we use fact, value, dichotomy, it actually compartmentalizes political theory into some parts. For example, what is the dichotomy? Means when we talk about key fact and value-based political theory are actually opposite to each other. Opposite to each other in what way? Just tell me what ways, what words come into your mind. I want to see. We are saying that fact-based and value-based approach to political theory are opposite to each other. लेकिन opposite to each other in what way? Opposite तो है लेकिन कैसे? What way? Descriptive versus prescriptive. Okay. What more? Because when we talk about fact-based, yes, it is descriptive in nature. It actually described through experiment. ये कि हमने experiment किया and this is it. And when we say prescriptive political theory actually talk about how things should run. It gives prescription. Quantitative versus qualitative, yes. When it comes to fact-based political theory, it actually conducts surveys, and through surveys they tell us, okay, this much percentage people believe in this much percentage of people believe in this. That is why conclusion is that we should run this particular political system in this particular way. So they talk about quantity. But when it comes to normative theory, value-based theory, it talks about qualitative aspect. How quality of this whole political system over the lives of people, society can be improved. Status quoist versus change-oriented. Very well said, Vishti. When it comes to fact-based political theory, they are status quoist in nature. It means they conduct experiments and they tell, okay, this is it. But when it comes to normative political theory, this is change-oriented because it is having a critical element in that. And I'm also having one particular question from this aspect for today's class also. This question can be asked from this particular unit, political theory. Okay, I'm going to elaborate on this change oriented and how it is connected to normative political theory. A separate segment of question can be built on this. Now, what actually is what ought to be? Yes, Bharat, Rajshekhar, utopian versus realistic, practical. अब देखिए राजशेखर ने कहा कि when it comes to fact-based political theory, तो okay, great. Now we are all set to start, right? So it means we are clear in introduction. We have to put a brief about what is value-based, what is fact-based, what is dichotomy. And when we say what is dichotomy, we should also give element of what kind of dichotomy it is, compartmentalization, so that our body part ka base ban jaye. Okay, our introduction should have connection with the body part. So we can do it like this. Just take a look. Fact value dichotomy in political science refers. It means first we are telling what it is. Okay, to the erstwhile compartmentalization of approaches to political analysis. Okay, so actually, whether we talk about fact, whether we talk about value, what are they doing? They are conducting a particular political analysis as descriptive versus prescriptive, qualitative versus quantitative, and empirical versus normative. Okay, so these are three categories. Okay, you can also write status quoist versus change oriented. Now, later the contemporary approach of post-behavioralism sought to reconcile the dichotomy, because there was this dichotomy, descriptive versus prescriptive, qualitative versus quantitative, empirical versus normative. But there was a crisis in the 1960s, and that is when we saw that we need to reconcile. And how we can reconcile? By creating a fusion of both. Okay, our political theory should be descriptive as well as prescriptive. We should have scientific experiments. We should also talk about values by seeking relevance and action on political and social issues. And how we are going to design? Talking about the relevance and action which is needed on particular political or social issue. So when you are done with this introduction, just jump into body part. And your body part should be divided into three parts. What are the three parts? First, we are going to talk about value-based approach. Why? Because when it comes to evolution of political theory, value-based approach came first. And there were some limitations in value-based approach. That is why we evolved to fact-based approach. So there will be two segments of your answer. And then we are going to talk about reconciliation. That is going to be third part. So what you are going to say in value-based? We are going to say value-based approaches were traditional methods, such as philosophical, normative, and you are going to give example of Plato, as Plato was considered father of political philosophy, right? Now, give a brief about actually what is the meaning of value-based approach. Substantiate your argument by giving actual example. What Plato was saying? Plato was actually saying we can drive this political theory through some ideas. Because I hope you remember what Plato was saying, what Socrates was saying. Idea is the reality. Idea shapes the reality. prescribing what ought to be, right? And then you're going to give example of other political thinkers who have used this value-based approach. For example, value-based political theorizing gained popularity as Habermas, Rawls, Hannah Arendt. They all built on value-based approach. So values pursued were the ideal state. तो values थी कौन सी? तो पहले हमने बताया what is the approach. Then we substantiated our argument by using a political thinker, especially जहां से शुरू हुआ Western political thought में. Then we gave example of those political thinkers who have used this value approach. And then we are talking about what are those values. So जैसे ideal state, justice, liberty, rights, equality, these are the approaches. Please keep in mind what happens in actual exam scenario, that you know a lot, you know value-based approach, you know normative theories, but दिमाग में रहता क्या? रहता ये okay, normative theory, what ought to be? Behavioralist approach, talk about scientific, we can give example of David Easton. But what about the elements which you need to include in answer? So keep in mind, define, then substantiating your argument with a thinker like Plato. Third, what are the other political thinkers who base their theories on values? And then what are those values? ये दिमाग में नहीं आता, right? That is why we are having these sessions. Now, what is the second part? Second part is fact-based approach, because it came after that. So keep in mind that what happened, many students actually, they have read their notes so many times that they're not writing actual answers in test or exam. They are actually writing notes. क्योंकि notes में पता है ना, एक heading ये हो गई, फिर दूसरी heading बनाओ. Fact-based approach, और fact-based approach के बारे में जो key elements पता है, the elements which we know about fact-based approach, just pour it in our answer. That is what many students do. But what is the difference in answer? In answer, your one segment of body part should interlink with the second part, right? If you're using value-based approaches, then if you move to the fact-based approach, then use some lines which actually interlink. And what is the interlink here? Interlink is crisis. What were the shortcomings? Okay, not just put another subheading and and many times what is there? Flair is missing, coherence is missing in answer. Okay, ऐसा लगता है कि there's a break in answer. That break should not be there. That is why UPSC is having mains exam to check your articulation. Later, value-based approaches were criticized. So this is our linking point for being divorced of reality. पता है ना अभी आपको कि talking about normative होना चाहिए, what ought to be, but what is the reality? Devoid of reality. Biased, limited to the armchair theories espoused by those sitting in very towers, which Easton said it was considered as a crisis, right? This paved the way for fact-based methods. So this was the interlinking line, and now we are starting on the second part. Okay, fact-based methods such as empiricism, behavioralism. So when I say empiricism, it means we are talking about getting some relevant data. We are talking about observation, surveys. Behavioralism, and now we are incorporating some segments of psychology, how people think, how people react to this particular situation. Those methods focused on facts, what is or what is, kya hai kya. That is fact-based approach. Empiricism founded by Locke. तो हमने क्या किया था ऊपर? First we talked about what is, then we talked about who used this, then we talked about who were the others who used it, and then we talked about what are the values. Had furthered by, so founded by Locke and furthered by Mill, Lasky, and Marx. So they used these fact-based approach, right? Empiricism grew into behavioralism. So first we conducted survey, and then finally we fused into behavioralism. Fact-based approach, behavioralism, born after World Wars, fueled by American political scientists. I've explained you when I was talking about the context of this question. Deviated from values and adopted a scientific research and survey methods to explain and predict political behavior. So focused, concentrated on factual analysis. And if we can give example of Easton, Wallace, Bentley, Laswell, Catlin, etc., were prominent pilots in this movement. Okay, so these were the people who were actually involved in evolving of fact-based approach. Okay, because Marx used fact-based approach, but Marx did not give actual structure of this political theory कि इस approach को use कैसे करना है, इस पर Marx ने काम नहीं किया. Marx was having his own agenda, okay, for emancipating workers. But when it comes to Easton contributed a lot in development of behavioralist approach. And Easton is one thinker whose principles actually helped in evolving this behavioralist approach during this crisis phase, when this transition was happening from normative to behavioral. And later part of his life, Easton was the one who actually criticized behavioral approach. And from the Easton's views, we found evolution into new approach, which was post-behavioral approach. So there was one speech in which Easton used this phrase, credo of relevance. So he said, we are focusing too much on scientific studies or researches, surveys, that our theories are not relevant. So we need to bring relevance, and relevance can only come when we infuse values in our political theory. So Easton's contribution cannot be sidelined in this evolution of political theory. So you are going to give some names who actually piloted this movement. Okay. Now you are going to say, now we are coming to the juncture. Okay, linking part. Behavioralism intensified on techniques and scientific interpretation of facts to explain and describe political behavior. This is behavioralism, okay, which is under fact-based approach. When we talk about fact-based approach, it started with empiricism, means surveys, observation, then it matured, and finally we have started giving this name behavioralism. So most popular word in this movement, evolved movement, was behavioralism. One was normative, then behavioralism, and then post-behavioralism. Okay. So what is behavioralism? Intensified on techniques, scientific interpretation of facts to explain and describe political behavior. Why we are having this behavior. Now, when we talk about post-behavioralism, now we should talk about why behavioralism was criticized. भाई कुछ कमी होगी behavioralism में, तभी we had post-behavioralism. So in general, many students just remember this, okay, because post-behavioralism was talking about science, not talking about values. Okay, ये लिख देंगे हो जाएगा काम. No, because we need to bring depth in our answer. We should remember 2-3 names. आपको पता है एक क्वेश्चन आना, तो at least remember 2-3 names, right? So you can say in criticism of behavioralism, as Wallin said, obsessed with methods. Means behavioralism is obsessed with methods. Dismissing ethics, M. Reamer said, American political thinker, devoid of ethics. How can we talk about any political theory without ethics? Because ethics is like a yardstick, guiding light. And if political science is not guiding light of society and politics, why that is political science? M. Reamer said. So you can just say dismissing ethics, because we have to compress our views in minimum words possible. Next, undermining political philosophy. That was the view of conservatives who believed in the earlier tradition of political theory. Now, Seebey said becoming a pseudo-political science. That is what Seebey said. So these are the 4 arguments which you are going to use in criticism of behavioralism. Okay. Now what Robert Dahl said. Just remember this. Whenever question is asked on this dichotomy of facts and this values, so you should remember Robert Dahl. क्योंकि Robert Dahl ने सुलह कराने की बात की थी दोनों. Because Robert Dahl was the one who was saying that we should end this dichotomy between facts and values. So जिसने दोस्ती कराई है facts and values में, उसको तो याद रखो, Robert Dahl. Thus, neo and post-behavioralism sought applications of methods and knowledge to drive relevant, actionable solutions to pertinent political problems. So now post-behavioralism, bring more relevance to the political problems. And how? It was infusing the element of both. So in conclusion, you can say that facts and values are not dichotomous, but are in continuum. It means, yes, there was a phase when we believed in this value-based approach, and then we also had a phase in which we were talking about scientific revolution, scientific methods in political science, but both were necessary. अगर normative में crisis ना आता तो हमारे पास scientific method ना मिलता. If scientific methods, if by using too much scientific methods we were not having this crisis, then how would have we evolved into post-behavioralism? So actually this was a continuum. Post-behavioralism re-employed both facts and values in political theory building. Political methods evolved by tilting towards values, then facts. So this is the journey. First, political methods were tilted towards values from Plato to this World War. Then facts, and finally climbed to compromise equilibrium. This is an important line. मतलब इसको दिमाग में चिपका लीजिए. You should paste this argument in your mind. Whenever question is going to be asked from there, you are going to use this. First, it was a tilted towards value, then facts, and finally we found a compromise equilibrium. So post-behavioralism settled the conflict to a large extent, although later traditionalist, Marxist, postmodernist, and critical theorists have pointed out some areas of improvement in post-behavioralism also. And why we are using this particular line? Because question was saying examine. Since question was saying examine, that is why we have examined all the three stages. We examined value, we examined facts, and then we also examined post-behavioral approach. Now, let's come to the next question. Question is, political philosophy not only seeks to set up ideal standards for society and governance, but also undertake the examination of existing social and political institutions, elucidate and comment. Political philosophy not only seeks to set up ideal standards. Just read this particular statement till this part. So whenever we talk about political philosophy, the word is philosophy. So general conception is this: yes, philosophy means we are talking about setting some ideal standards. That is why we are calling it philosophy, right? But यहाँ पर कह रहा है not only, means this is one function of political philosophy, because when we talk about philosophy, yes, philosophy talks about setting ideal standards, but this is not the only job, right? But also undertake examination of existing social and political institutions. It means political philosophy, ऐसा नहीं है वो सिर्फ बात करती है, this is how ideal society is going to come. This is let's talk about these values. This is how we are going to bring ideal setup in this society, having this kind of rules at the level of these political institutions. All of just bring some practicality in your understanding. अगर आपने practicality ले आए अपनी understanding, तो फिर आपको ये चीजें रटनी नहीं पड़ेंगी. Now, then you need not to cram these. Let me tell you how. Start interlinking things. Take example of our constitution. Our constitution has nothing to do with this particular question. But then also I'm saying, let's talk about Indian constitution. And tell me, do you find some elements in our constitution? Can you tell me any elements in our constitution actually which are outcome of political philosophy? Concept of general will, fundamental rights, social justice, yes. Fundament, okay. HRC, okay. DPSPs, liberty, welfare state, yes, Vishjit. Don't you think these are the outcome of political philosophy? Someone way back was thinking about welfare state, postulated some ideas, and eventually these ideas got expanded, and finally these ideas got placed in some sacred documents, and which were shaping the lives of people. Are you looking at the wider perspective of the application of political philosophy? Right? So this is clear, right? Okay. Political philosophy, yes, it set ideal standard for society and governance. Yes, we are seeing this an application part of our constitution, present in our constitution. but also to undertake the examination of existing political and social institutions. Now tell me, take example of Plato. अब modern में आ गया, अब ancient में जाकर देखिए. When Plato was using political philosophy, Plato, father of political philosophy, when Plato was saying, I want to bring ideal state in Athens. So was it just about looking forward, or Plato was actually examining the existing social and political institutions of Athens? Yes, he was examining the actual social and political institutions of Athens, and that is why Plato was criticizing the education system of Athens. Corruption. That is why Plato was criticizing the kind of democracy which was there in Athens. Don't you see, when we talk about political philosophy, it actually has two segments. Generally, people focus on what ought to be, setting ideal standards, but you cannot set ideal standard until and unless you examine the existing social institutions and political institutions and you criticize them. You find some shortcomings in them, because by finding shortcomings, you build something ideal out of them. There were some shortcomings in the society of Athens. There were shortcomings in the political institutions of Athens. And look at any political philosophy, you will find that that political philosopher was building his ideas on some criticism. That person was not happy with the affairs of the state at the time, and that is why he wanted to build something. That is why he was talking about idealism. Looking at the question directive, elucidate and comment, the two question directive. When the word is elucidate, it means you have to expand on the core idea which is mentioned in question. I'm using the word expand on the core idea which is mentioned in question. When the word is comment, you need to bring some perspective on this particular situation. Means you can use the certain scholars, what they say on this particular thing. Okay. Now, coming to the introduction part. So we are clear with this point. What are the keywords? Political philosophy is not just about setting ideal standards. It undertakes the examination of existing political, social political institutions. It means in introduction, we need to define the keyword political philosophy, its application, and then we need to, in brief, we need to clear our stand on its expansion. Means when we are going to expand on this idea, and then idea is going to be expanded in body part. So we can say that political philosophy can be considered, we are defining it. I've told you in introduction, we are defining it. Political philosophy can be described as a branch of learning which is primarily concerned with moral and substantive dimensions of politics. Moral, kya hona chahiye? Substantial, elaborated application. Describing the nature of political theory, George Catlin observed that. And why I'm using the word George Catlin in the introduction itself? Question is saying elucidate to karna, expand to karna, define to karna, comment bhi karna, right? You need to comment also. Observe that the theory of politics is divided into political science and political philosophy. It means when we talk about politics, one aspect is political science, another aspect is political philosophy, and focus of question is political philosophy, right? Remember George Catlin, categorization, simple categorization. George Catlin cutting political science into two parts. Just remember it like this, because I know it is a task to remember so many scholars. But just make some mnemonics. इसमें इसका इस्तेमाल करना. It is a science that admits concepts such as justice, equality, etc., which both observable and testable. Why we are saying yes, it has application in science, because science, when we use the word science, science means actually which give principles about how things are working, and these principles are made after some observation. So we made the observation of gravitation, and then we tell, okay, this is the principle. Similarly, justice, equality are some principles. Bharat, we are using the statement of Catlin here just to categorize that there's a difference between political philosophy and political science. Because when you use the word justice, equality, you also use the word, you also has this application in political science, right? But when we use the word political philosophy, it is in normative sense. Because when I'm using the word justice and equality, it emerged from normative approach of political theory. But when it comes to modern times in political science, we have some methods to actually vet our understanding of justice, right? But when it comes to political philosophy, we only focus on normative part. So that is why we are creating a difference here. On the other hand, political philosophy is a part of normative political theory, as it provides answer to questions such as what is justice, concept of rights, distinction between is and ought, etc. Bharat and everyone, we are having these PSIR enrichment sessions with a purpose. Actually, what happens in foundation courses, you're too busy in actually understanding things. That is why we call it foundation, building foundation, base. Acha, aisa kuch hota hai, political philosophy, political science. These are the aspects. And then you have some test series in various places. So you attempt test and you get evaluation. Then why I'm having this enrichment and in this format that I'm going to minute details and hitting on those parts where most of the students are going to commit mistake. That is my experience. Just look at these two differentiations. क्यों मैंने use किया यहाँ पर Catlin को. Look at these two differentiations. When we use the word science, it admits concepts such as justice, but which are both observable and testable. Justice, equality, you can observe them, you can test them. But when it comes to political philosophy and we use the word justice, then its focus is on what is justice, why that is needed, kya hai aur kya hona chahiye. That is it. So, because question is asking political philosophy, then you should actually impress the evaluator that you actually understand the difference between political philosophy and political science, and you can differentiate by using certain examples. That justice can be present in political science, the word political science when you use, and justice can be present in the word political philosophy, but the way you approach justice will be different. Because keyword is political philosophy, then we need to do justice with this word political philosophy. You should impress the evaluator that actually your understanding is not generic in nature. When you bring your specificity of understanding in your answer, then only you gain marks. And this is what differentiate in the marks which someone is getting 270, 280, and others who are getting 310 or 315 or maybe more than that. Now, since we have impressed the evaluator, okay, we know political philosophy and political science are different, and we have told you justice वहां पर concept use करेंगे. अगर हम करेंगे observable and testable, when we are using here is ought. These are the focal areas. Now you're going to say, according to Catlin, a political philosopher is primarily concerned with normative values to provide the goals. The word is goals, which citizens, state, and society ought to pursue. This is what political philosophers do. Political philosophers provide goal to citizens, state, and society that we should pursue. In other words, it attempts to generalize about right conduct of political life. Right conduct of political life. So, abhi tak jo humne kiya hai, Bharat, Rajshekhar, and everyone, what we did, since question was saying elucidate, so question wants to know whether you understand the application part of this statement or not. So, abhi tak jo humne kiya discuss, wo pata kya kiya? Abhi tak keval humne answer के इस part तक elucidate किया है. We have elucidated our answer until this point only. Political philosophy not only seeks to set up ideal standards for society and governance. अभी तक और यहाँ पर भी not पे नहीं गए अभी. Now we are going to jump on this undertake examination of existing society and political institutions, because the word is elucidate, right? If the word has been come in, then it was not necessary to get into this depth. But since two question directive are used, then we need to, touch these areas. Then you are going to say, however, scholars like D.D. Raphael argues that the determination of normative value as what ought to be is only a part of the function of political philosophy. And this is what I explained to you when I was explaining the context of this question. When we talk about political philosophy, what ought to be is just a part, not the whole political philosophy, as many people understand this. Just ask some of your friends, and fair chances that they're going to say political philosophy. It means what ought to be, giving goals to society, state, citizens, that goals we should pursue to lead a better position in the society, of these societies. So that is their understanding. So use the word D.D. Raphael, this understanding. He argued that political philosophy also has its critical function. Yahan se a question bana. From the views of D.D. Raphael, this understanding. Critical function, like, according to Raphael, in his work Problems of Political Philosophy, this is his work. While it is a positive that some of the classical political philosophers have set out the ideal forms of society, kaisa hona chahiye hamara samaj, how our society should be, but this hasn't been their central concern. But yahi concern nahi tha. Like I gave you example of Plato. Plato was not just concerned about how Athens should be. Plato was concerned about the state of affairs of Athens at that time, and that is why he built his political philosophy. If you have read about the life of Plato, then you must be knowing that originally Plato did not want to be a teacher. वो teacher नहीं बनना चाहता. What Plato wanted from his life, in earlier part of his life, because he was actually influenced by the profession of his father. Yes, some people say that he wanted to be a medical practitioner in some part of his life, but in his younger days, he was resolved to become a politician. But he finally, changed his mind and wanted to become a political philosopher and a teacher, to be precise, because he wanted to make Athens as an ideal state. And he was clear that by entering into politics, it may be possible that he may change certain things. But if he became a teacher and established an academy and he, influenced the youth, then he can alter the whole Athens. So why he changed this? Changing his view was also depended on the criticism he was, having towards the society and the political institutions of Athens at that time. That is why he argued that even in Plato, the purpose of depicting an ideal society is to criticize existing society and to promote understanding of general concepts such as justice. So Plato was criticizing sophists. Plato was criticizing democracy of that time. Plato was criticizing the social order at that time. And that is how he was giving the concept of justice. Then you can say, according to Raphael, the fundamental purpose of traditional philosophy has been the critical evaluation of beliefs. This is the core line in the conclusion part. The fundamental purpose of traditional philosophy has been critical evaluation of beliefs. So they were doing critical evaluation of belief and then gave their own beliefs. It attempts at giving rational ground for accepting and rejecting the existing beliefs. And that is why in the previous question, when someone was saying some logical ko hum yahan par use karenge compartmentalization, I said no. Because when we say about value-based political approach, for example, Plato or any other thinker, so actually they were rejecting the beliefs and building, pushing new beliefs on the basis of certain logic, certain rationality, and those rationalities were based on reality of that time. But the values they were projecting were of, way ahead, giving some goal and order which are usually taken for granted. Now, take a look at this. So this is the question. how does Hobbesian state of nature differ from Locke? So we are going to come on this question. Let me show you the trend on the theory of state. So देखिए जब हमने political theory की बात की first net की, so I talked about what is political theory. ठीक है, एक question. Relevance of political theory. So in this discussion, the two questions which we just discussed, the two elements were there. What is political theory? Relevance of political theory. Decline of political theory. Because when we talked about normative political theory, then behavioral political theory, then there was a decline. Then we talked about post-behavioral theory, right? Resurgence of political theory. It means how it again became prominent. Then this part, explain, comment on approaches of political theory. Okay. Then my advice here is, after this lecture, pick up your notes or pick up this set of answers which you have written until now from this particular unit. I'm advising you to segregate your answers unit wise now, because these are going to be the ready reference before mains. Okay. And just mention tick, tick, tick if you are confirmed that if question is asked from this particular area, you have the relevant points. Okay. Rest we are going to judge through your test. Okay. Evaluation. Now, coming to the second part, this theory of state, one question is going to be asked. Okay. So I'm saying it again, not a single dimension of any unit which is important should be left behind. That is why your revisions should be tuned with this. Okay. And I am with you in this class and beyond this class, but you should be working on your edge, because keep this in mind, because this is the window which we have now. जो extension हुआ है prelims का, postponement हुआ है, तो ये window है brush up करने की, so that you have peace when you are giving prelims, and after prelims you are ready to hit. Okay. Now, from this particular task, theory of state, questions are liberal, neoliberal, Marxist, pluralist, post-colonial, feminist theory. So, and from every section, point should be ready. Monistic pluralist theory and the impact of globalization. Now, there's this part overlapping with WPT. Okay, so the question which I'm going to discuss now is this part, which is overlapping with WPT, means theory of state. So what is the difference between the theory of, within the theory of state, there's state of nature. So what is the difference between Hobbesian and Lockean state of nature? It's a 15 marker. Okay. What faults many of the students do? Let me tell you that. When they read this particular question and they have gone through Western political theory, and Western political theory, they have crammed the notes of Hobbes and Locke. Then they think, okay, this question is lollipop. What is expected? It is saying, how is it different? So let's make one segment for Hobbes, one segment for Locke. Just create a differentiation, draw a line, और बस वहाँ पर differentiation बता देंगे, हो गया काम. Do you think this particular format of answering is actually going to impress evaluator about you articulating your thoughts well? No. It means you should have certain arguments which actually link. First, they set the context of these two, Hobbesian state of nature, Locke. So what is going to set the context? Means how these two are connected through social contract tradition. Because whenever you talk about state of nature is in social contract tradition. Means both Hobbes and Locke belong to social contract tradition. So it should in brief, you should talk about social contract tradition. In brief, you should talk about state of nature. Then within introduction part, in brief, you need to talk about some keywords which differentiate between Hobbes and Locke. These three elements should be in your introduction. Then when it comes to body part, now in body part, what you can do, take one political thinker, say Hobbes, and then you elaborate on this. Because in introduction, you have just mentioned the keyword. For example, the difference is based on how the state of nature would be. One is saying that state of nature is brutish, a state of nature is in chaos, and other is saying state of nature is peaceful. So this kind of differentiation you have mentioned in introduction, but In body part, you need to elaborate on. If one is saying the state of nature was in chaos, why it was in chaos? And if someone is saying it was in peace, why it was in peace? Then you need to talk about the difference in the social contract of the two. क्योंकि state of nature different है तो social contract पे आना भी different है, reason different है state of nature पे आना. There's a difference in the reason by which social contract was formed. So this is how you need to frame your answer. Let me show you. So as I said, first, since the question keyword is state of nature, so you need to talk about state of nature, right? So you can say that, define, introduction. A state of nature refers to hypothetical condition. Actual में तो थी नहीं, hypothetical condition of human beings before or without political association. This idea has been relied on many social contract theorists. Social contract theorists, two elements, state of nature, social contract theorists, such as Hobbes and Locke, with the purpose of explaining the need of a social contract. So why they were giving this state of nature? Because by the state of nature, they were making a point that there were some situations in state of nature which led people to get into social contract, to examine the limits and justification of political authority. Because when this social contract came, what does social contract do? It limits and justify political authority. If particular organization, set of people are having authority, by what reason they are having authority? With what reason they are having authority? So this clear definition is done by social contract. Yes, it is clear. Now, coming to this part, how was Hobbes' state of nature? So according to Hobbes, a state of nature was state of war. A state of nature was state of war. Because why it was a state of nature was of state of war? Due to the reason that humans were brutish, individualistic, cruel. So human being, what he calls felicity. So continual success in achieving the objects of desire. He further makes assumption that in the state of nature, all human beings are equal, possessing roughly same level of strength and skill. And this is major contention. If some people are having too much strength, another are not having that much strength, then it may be possible that those who are having those who are of too much strength, they are going to bring the order. Because there's a difference in the strength, na? There's a difference in the skill set. But Hobbes was saying, no, actually, in the state of nature, they were possessing roughly same level of strength and skill. And tell me, if all of you are having same strength and skill, and we are not having any police, any judiciary, nothing is there. Let's create a state of nature. What is going to happen? People are going to come into clash, right? Clash से कब बचा जा सकता है? If some people are having too much strength, then other people might think, यार छोड़ो, क्यों टक्कर ली? But if they are having equal strength, then they will say, ऐसा कैसे जाने दूंगा? मैं तो लूंगा अपना हक. I am going to take take what is going to give me satisfaction. I'm going to fetch that. So one is they are possessing equal strength and skill, and another is there was scarcity of goods. If you are having same strength, same skill, and there is prosperity, no dearth of goods, तो clash होगा? नहीं होगा. There's no need of clash. But all of you are of equal strength and skill, and there is scarcity on the goods. Then what is going to happen? युद्ध होगा. There is going to be war. That is why Hobbes said state of war. Now think yourself, how many of you were about to miss these 2 points? Miss करने वाले थे, right? But अब नहीं करेंगे आप. Because these are the differentiating factors in this 370 and 270 and 310 and 310. Now, coming to the other part. So what he was saying, he takes a low view of human nature. So we have said, here we have told what is Hobbes' state of nature, why this why there is, this war. We have categorized this due to two reasons which Hobbes gave, and now we are having analysis कि क्या क्या उनका कहना, elaborate. So he takes a low view of human nature similar to Machiavelli. Due to this, endlessly pursue their desires with no agreement on good or bad. For humans, in state of nature, there's nothing like good or bad. Whatever they feel कि चाहिए, they are going to have it. Even if there's a conflict, because same skill set is there. Same skills, same strength is there. Human beings come into conflict with each other. Good bad का तो concept ही नहीं है. This should be clearly mentioned. There is no agreement on good and bad. This is one reason. Otherwise, agar state of nature में good or bad का concept होता, if in this hypothetical situation, consider that there was a concept of good and bad. So there will be low chances of conflict, right? Because if you think that is bad and I also think that is bad, there's no point of having conflict, because we both are on the same plane. But in state of nature, there is no case, no assurity that we are going to be on same plane, because we don't follow same set of rules of good or bad. There is no rule of good or bad. Life in this pre-society condition is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes sees the way out of this predicament is being the creation of a ruler, a sovereign, or leviathan. And that is why Hobbes gave this, no, we need to bring this thing into order. And for bringing this thing into order, we need a sovereign, a ruler. One authority having whole power, leviathan, which will severely punish those who disobey laws. So now this is how you have explained what was the idea of Hobbes. Now, second part is Locke. So in Locke, you are going to say, in contrast, Lockean nature of state is a state of freedom and equality. Where, in case of Hobbes, what was that? Brutish, state of war. Here, state of freedom and equality. At that point, state of war. Bound by a law of nature or reason. So there was no law, no agreement on good or bad in Hobbes' idea. But in Locke, there was a law of nature. And what was law of nature? That was reason. Every man has reason, and we are having this reason because this reason is bestowed upon us by this nature. This state of nature is peaceful, with an orderly social interactions among its inhabitants. देखिए कितना difference. Here all men are free to order their actions and dispose of their possessions, persons, as they think fit, within the bounds of law of nature. And law of nature is reason, rationality. And why people are not having conflict in the state of nature? Because Locke was saying, because these are rational. Because Rajshekhar is rational enough that even if there is no police, no judge, then also I should not take away property of Bharat. This is a rationality of Rajshekhar. Rajshekhar is not taking away something which belongs to Bharat, because Rajshekhar knows that there is no law, no police. If I take away something which belongs to Bharat, then Bharat is going to come behind me. Then Bharat is going to fetch whatever was Bharat's, or even Bharat can take away more. So what's the better choice, Rajshekhar? What's the better way? Better way is just keep what is yours. Right? This is the better way, right? This is rationality of Rajshekhar, and this rationality is given by nature. And Locke says this is law of nature. So whenever in Locke's state of nature you use the word law of nature, it means reason, right? Then you are going to say, जब सब कुछ अच्छा है, इतना अच्छा चल रहा है, when everything is so fine and peaceful, orderly, then why you need social contract? We need social contract to resolve certain inconveniences. And what are the inconveniences? Inconveniences, okay, Rajshekhar and Bharat are using law of nature. Sasya is using law of nature. Sheikh Tala is using law of nature, rationality. But at one point, Vishwajit thought all of these are using their reasons. I am having a chance to make a way take away what is theirs, and don't follow this law of nature, because impulse is more than the reason. There's a moment in the life of Vishwajit, and Vishwajit took away whatever is yours, means Rajshekhar Sasya Bharat Sheikh. Now, all of you tell me what you are going to do. You are going to confront with Vishwajit or not? Those who say confront, then mention confront. Those who say no, दे देंगे ऐसे ही सब कुछ. We are going to give away whatever Vishwajit has taken. Then say give away. No, you are going to confront. Sheikh Tala is saying ऐसे ही दे देंगे. Okay. So Sheikh Tala is being Plato here. Okay, he's talking about a utopia devoid of reality. Now, so what is going to happen? Many people are going to confront. Yes. So it means it is going to bring disorder in this orderly social interaction. So that is why Locke said only to iron out certain inconveniences, need for established known law and impartial judge. Because confrontation can happen. There's a possibility of confrontation. There's a possibility of disorder due to some people. That is why we need a particular impartial judge, a known law in the state of nature that individuals decide to sign a social contract. And that is why you all decided to sign a social contract, set up a civil or political society. Both of them, अच्छा, यहाँ तक आपने clear कर दिया, ठीक है? Hobbes, Locke. If you are clear until this point, just mention Hola. Then I'm going to tell you how you are going to, articulate them together in the last part. Okay, clear. So now you have cleared the difference. Now bring a fusion of these views, a kind of conclusion. Both of them ultimately suggest the establishment of superior authority. So whenever question is asking, how does Hobbesian state of nature differ from that of Locke? Generally, students have this thing in mind. Okay, demand is difference, means we need to talk about only those points which differentiate between the two. No. In the end part, you need to also pinpoint on those things on which Hobbes and Locke both converge. This gives a sense of completion in your articulation. This is not a graduate or school exam. Okay, this is demand of UPSC. A sense of completion should be there. When the word is difference, you need to, in the conclusion, you need to pinpoint on those points on which these thinkers converge, and those elements should be already present in your body part. So those both agree on superior authority, nature of which differ, namely an impartial judge for Locke and absolute ruler for Hobbes. So you have said converge on superior authority, but there's a difference in the kind of superior authority. Because for Hobbes, absolute power needs to be given. Why absolute power? Because Hobbes has said that this brutish state of nature, this disorder can be bring into order by iron fist. You need absolute ruler. But according to Locke, conditions were not so bad. So that is why we need not to give too much power to this sovereign, to this ruler. We only need impartial judge to handle these kind of confrontations, which Vishwajit and all of you people, some of you people were having, in order to cope with these issues originating in respective state of nature. Because kind of nature is different. That is why kind of sovereign authority is different. So first convergence and then differentiation. Even though each of these philosophers is fairly consistent with their own account, their stance are almost entirely antithetical. Apne way mein, they are fairly consistent, but if you compare them, it's antithetical. Interestingly, both have been criticized by Karl Marx. Karl Marx have criticized both because according to Karl Marx, they both are devoid of facts of history. They are abstract notions. Because according to Karl Marx, there was no time in society when people were living, with equal strength, equal skill. What Hobbes was saying, because there was always a difference in the people. There were always two classes, as you read in Karl Marx. And on Hobbes, on Locke, he said there was no time where people were living peacefully because differentiation was always. So you need not to elaborate on these points. What differentiate Karl Marx from this Hobbes and Locke's theory, but you need to just pinpoint कि they both were criticized by Karl Marx to give a sense of completion in the last. Coming to one of the favorite theories of many people in justice, Robert Nozick's theory of entitlement. And the word is examine. Let me show you from where I'm asking this particular question. I'm asking this from justice part, and we should be clear the kind of question. Yes. So I've told you that from justice part, one question is going to be asked, and this question is going to be Rawls theory of justice, or comparison or differentiation between the two, or criticism. Within criticism, Nozick's entitlement theory is used as a criticism in Rawls, but a separate question is asked many times by UPSC on this Nozick's theory. Similarly, on communitarian by Walther's view and Sandel's view. But the point is here we are going to take up Nozick's theory. Now, examine the Robert Nozick's theory of entitlement. First of all, the word is examine, right? It means it is not like we just need to tell about what is Robert Nozick's theory. Agar yahan par question, if the question directive which UPSC asks is discuss, elaborate, elucidate, then way we answer is going to be different. We are going to pinpoint of certain sections of Robert Nozick's theory of entitlement. We are going to talk about we are going to start with why he gave his theory, building a short contrast with Rawls' theory. Okay, what was his pinpoint? How actually it is said that it came from libertarian view. Then you are going to talk about certain principles of Robert, Nozick's theory of entitlement, and then you conclude with a gist like this was a criticism of Rawls. And what was the criticism? Because Rawls was saying a universal theory of justice, and he was saying no, this cannot be universal. So इस तरीके से आप conclude कर देते. But the word is examine. It means we need to bring a critical element over this Nozick's theory of entitlement. हमें इनके points को भी criticize करना, right? We are going to tell what is, then we are going to criticize. So in introduction, you are going to talk about Robert Nozick, define. Whenever you need to check, whether you want to check if whatever you have written in introduction is correct or not, so there's a method. Just keep a hand over the question and just read your introduction. If by reading introduction you can get to the question कि हाँ अगर introduction ऐसा है तो question ये होगा, then you can think yes, your introduction is well online. Okay, so question should be clear by reading the introduction, and that is why I always say introduction is like a gate of your answer, and it should clear the context of the question. So Robert Nozick, in his Anarchy, State and Utopia, Anarchy, State and Utopia work, sought to advance an alternative to Rawls' theory of justice. That is why we are reading Nozick in our syllabus, right? Nozick ridicules Rawls' approach, which seeks to determine the principle of distribution of certain goods as if, read this line, as if they have come to us as a gift from heaven. And this line will be clearly setting context of this particular entitlement theory. Because what Rawls was doing, Rawls was finding a principle which was actually, Rawls was saying is a universal principle of justice. Nozick was saying that you are talking about a universal principle by which you are going to decide the distribution of resources. Lekin why? You are thinking that these are the gifts from heaven. These are not the gifts from heaven. These are the product of the labor of man. If something is a product of my labor, how you can take away this from me and give it to someone who is not having this product or this good and say this is justice? This is not justice. You can only think about redistributing something which is a gift from heaven. How can you use this principle as a universal? This is not fair. And you are saying you are bringing justice as fairness in Rawls' theory. That's a sham. Okay. So I'm just talking about the feelings of Nozick. Okay. Now, three principles which he gave in his entitlement theory. Number one, principle of just acquisition. So, कुछ अच्छी बातें भी की Nozick. Nozick said, if person acquired some previously unknown, unowned bits of the natural world, means अगर आपने कुछ acquire किया, if you have bought something, if you have acquired something, जिस acquisition से किसी और का नुकसान नहीं हुआ, if you have acquired something due to which nobody has made worse off by doing so, then that is fine. Means if your acquisition is not making other people worse off, then it is fine. This means that this mode of acquisition should not result in creating scarcity for others. This is similar to conditions spelled in John Locke's second treatise of the government, in which similar acquisition, as long as enough, because all of us know when it comes to John Locke, and when John Locke was giving his theory of rights, in which he was talking about importance of right to property, but at that point he was saying right to property I'm advocating, but that property should be acquired by just means. How many of you remember John Locke's this view? Don't you find kind of similarity between Nozick's this view, principle of just acquisition, and this Locke's view, right? So as long as enough and good is left for others, that is fine. So man has absolute right over the product of his own labor. Okay. Now tell me, if there are three sources of water in a colony, okay, there are three pipelines in a colony, and by some reason, two pipelines are not working. And one pipeline, since two pipelines are not working and they have been, defunct, now Sheikh Tala got this news. And Sheikh Tala got to know that in in upcoming time, there may be more scarcity of water. Then what Tala did, Tala bribed the, area person who was responsible for this pipeline, someone from Jal Board, some executive engineer. And Tala purchased that area from which that line was going. Government hand over that particular area to Tala. Tala paid something. And now Tala is controlling that pipeline as his own source. He meri source hai, kyunki Tala is having some industry and Tala want to use this water. Now other person in the vicinity, means those colony people, they are in deep scarcity. But Tala has purchased this area, usage rights of this line, by his own money. Now tell me, in this condition, Nozick will support Tala, or Nozick will come and throw away Tala from that pipeline? So here, since this particular acquisition, principle of acquisition to hai, but this acquisition is not just, because this is creating scarcity for others. I've said this should not result in scarcity for others. That is principle of Nozick. But here, this acquisition is creating scarcity for others, and that is why Nozick will throw away Tala from this pipeline. Okay. Now, second principle, just transfer for holdings. The owner of property should decide the terms and conditions. So what is just transfer of holding? Just remember this. First, we have acquired something. So Nozick gave us principle of how you can acquire, what kind of acquiring just. Now, since we have acquired this particular property, then we should have certain rights to transfer this property. So in what ways our transfer of property will be considered as just, as per justice? This is what is explained in second principle. कि अगर हम किसी को बेच रहे हैं तो हाँ हम बेच सकते हैं, हमें adequate amount मिलना चाहिए. Means if we are selling something, that we should get us adequate amount, right? For example, some farmers are protesting in the outskirts of Delhi. Bharatiya Kisan Union, Rakesh Tiket, many of you must have heard about it, and you should have some understanding of this movement to use in your social movement, that particular unit. Now the point is, Now some of the farmers, although there are debates on certain sections, I'm not going into that, but the point is what they're saying, our crops are our property and we should have fair exchange, but certain provisions of this law may create conditions in future where we are not going to avail fair exchange, right? So this is the issue. So the owner of the property should decide the terms and condition of the transfer of the property. Particular point is this. First of all, Nozick said, who is going to decide the terms and condition of transfer of property? Owner. It should be an outcome of fair exchange. The amount which should be given. An amount is going to be decided by market rate. Thus, if one use others' labor or pay them as per market rates, they become owner of the product of their labor. This must be based on voluntary act without force or fraud. If transfer is being done, it should be done by a voluntary act. Means even if you want to acquire something, even if government wants to acquire something, that should be voluntary by the person whose property is that. Means government has to make some offer to such an extent that person is voluntarily giving that property. It should not be with force. In all such transactions, an individual shall be treated as an in itself, not as means to other ends. और इसका मतलब पता है क्या है? इसका मतलब ये है कि when a particular organization is acquiring someone's property, so what happens? That organization uses that person as a means to reach that property. Ultimately, we have to get the property from that person. This person is just a means. But Nozick said, no, it is not a mean. The person is an end in itself. Actually, the property belongs to him. All the rights of transfer holding belongs to him. So that should be given by without force and fraud. This is like the moral principle enunciated by Immanuel Kant. Don't you think when Nozick is saying person is not a means, person is an end in itself, actually it reflects human dignity? Now, third principle and last principle of rectification. So all of you know what is the meaning of the word rectification. Rectification is done when something is not wrong, when something is wrong. We want to correct a mistake, right? So this is precisely the area where the state, the international community will be justified to intervene in order to restore justice. So Nozick gives some authority to the state as well as international community that they can intervene where we need to restore justice. So intervention is possible only to restore justice. That should be clear. So Nozick bias for a competitive market society which favors the rich. But when he says that actually intervention is possible only in case of restoring justice. You cannot take away property without force. That should be a voluntary act. So actually what he favors competitive market society. So actually what he's saying, he is giving more leverage to rich. He is absolving rich from social responsibility. Let me give you one example. We have a progressive taxation system in India, right? Progressive taxation system. So I'm making a statement, just tell me the statement is true or false, okay? If in an economy, a rich person, say a person with annual income more than 50 lakh is giving more tax than a person with annual income 10 lakh, then it shows progressive taxation system. Tell me this statement is true or false. That statement is false. I'm repeating the statement. In an economy, if someone is earning, if someone is with 50 lakh per annum annual income is giving more tax than someone with 10 lakh annual income giving less tax, then it shows progressive taxation income. No, it is not necessary that it's a progressive taxation system. Because progressive taxation system is when a person earning more is liable to pay more tax due to more tax rate. Let me give you an example. इकोनॉमी पढ़ानी पड़ रही है आप लोगों को, देख नॉजिक के लिए ला देखिए, if rate income tax slab rate is 10%. Okay. And we are considering no rebate we are giving on income tax. Okay. Directly taking example with respect to what is the example is saying. So consider that Sheikh Tala is earning 50 lakh per annum. Is it enough, Tala? काम चल जाएगा इतने में? Annually? नहीं. Sheikh Tala is saying no. बेटा आप मुझे लग रहा है बड़ी गड़बड़ियां करने वाले हो आगे जाके. If someone is saying 50 lakh में काम नहीं चलेगा, so what you are going to do after being a civil servant? You want to put the district on sale for your adventures in luxury. Now, someone else is having 10 lakh per annum. Consider example of Sham. Okay. I've given example of one tax rate that is 10%. But if 10% tax rate is imposed on a person having 50 lakh per annum income, what is the tax? What is the income tax which Tala is going to pay? What is the income tax? 10% of 50 lakh is 5 lakh. And same tax rate is being applied on someone who is having 10 lakh income. For example, Sham. So what is the income tax which Sham has to pay? 1 lakh. So 1 lakh is less than 5 lakh. So as per this example, 50 lakh, if someone is earning 50 lakh is paying more tax. Yes, Tala is paying more tax than Sham. But that does it mean that we are having progressive taxation system in this example? No. Progressive taxation system is if Sham is having 10% tax slab, if government is saying the Sham, you have to give 10% tax, and government is saying, Tala, since you are having more income, it is your more social responsibility. You are having more social responsibility. That is why you need to give 30% tax, 30% income tax. So this is progressive taxation system. Okay, this is progressive taxation system. So what Tala is now takes the situation of Tala. Earlier, Tala was paying 5 lakh, but now since we have introduced progressive taxation system in India, 30%. Now Tala has to give 15 lakh rupees as income tax. 15 lakh rupees income tax. Now, at this point, considering the situation, Nozick was saying, what is this? This is dacoity. Dakaiti kar rahe ho aap log. If someone is earning more because of his labors, his intellect. And you are saying, since you are earning more, it means you have to give more tax rate. Then you are punishing rich for being rich. That was the point which Nozick was making. But others of the view, since rich has more social responsibility, then it should be paying more. Okay, so you can remember it like this. Nozick was in favor of Tala. कि तला पर इतना जोर नहीं पड़ना चाहिए. 5 लाख ले रहे हैं, ठीक है. Tala should not shell out 15 lakh. Okay. He absolved the rich of all social responsibilities, not to speak of social indebtedness. Nozick justifies the economic disparities resulting from voluntary transfers. He says that if economic disparities exist in society and due to voluntary transfers, people, at one point there was redistribution in society. And the people were having equitable amount of resources, but some people were lazy, but some people were hardworking. And finally, these lazy people sold their land, sold their living. They were not creative, and that is why they are working for people who are creative, people who are rational, people who are taking risk. So that is why there will be economic disparity, and there's nothing wrong in this economic disparity. That was the point which Nozick was making. Yukti, I believe in a balance. I believe that Nozick was not completely true, because some people become rich not just by their labor. Some people became rich by their collusion. Although Nozick, in his first principle and second principle, made it clear that yes, if you are earning by your labor, not taking, your acquisition is not making others worse off. So although principally Nozick was fine, but I am not completely in favor of Nozick, considering the reality in which we live in, how people misuse these things, right, in order to gain undue profits. So there should be, fair chance. I am in favor of people getting due chance to use creativity to earn well. Now, for instance, if the inventor of the cure, now he gave this example. Now just read this example. If the inventor of a cure of a dreaded disease like cancer demands exorbitant charges from his patient, there is nothing wrong in this deal for him, for Nozick, because transfer is voluntary. He does not make anybody worse off by treating his patient. That's the logic of Nozick. Nozick says, if you have invented a, I should say, you have invented a particular process by which you can cure cancer, and you are charging exorbitant fees, then there is nothing wrong in charging exorbitant fees. That is the logic of Nozick. Nozick says, because you are not asking people to give you money, you are offering them. मुझे पता है, करवाना इलाज तो आ जाना मेरे पास. So don't you think this is, yes, this is intellectual property rights. This is application of Nozick in IPR. So whenever you write some article, whenever you use this, some dimension in essay, then you can use this idea of Nozick. This is the core idea which these pharmaceutical companies use. This is what is happening as of now when some companies have, for example, companies in US, just to take a look, what was the core agenda of our external affairs minister in his recent visit to USA. As Shashank talked to several, these vaccine manufacturers and asked them to sign a contract with Indian manufacturers so that they are going to pay, Indian manufacturers are going to pay them license fees, and Indian manufacturers are going to boost their manufacturing so as to vaccinate the population. But many of these US companies are not okaying it. They are saying, we have this formula, we have IPR, until and unless we get upfront payment, we are not going to devolve you rights. हम तो rights नहीं देंगे. And that is why they were saying कि we are not going to, we are not going to sign multiple contracts from the buying agencies, for example, different states. We want one point where we can take our payment. So at large, you can see many people are dying at daily basis, especially in the second wave in India. These companies have vaccination. If this vaccination rights are transferred to Indian companies and they can manufacture at a better rate, and these companies can also establish their plants there. But since they're looking for cost effect, they're looking for profits. Profit is the prime motive. And for this, we are seeing a lot of people dying, right? So Nozick was in its favor. Nozick was saying, वो किससे कह थोड़ी ना रहे हैं कि हम आओ हमारी वैक्सीन लो. They're not taking money out of the pockets of people. They're saying, we have developed this thing out of our labor. If you can pay this, take our medicine or this vaccine. If you have no capability to pay this, then we have no issue with you. Now tell me, how many of you are in favor of Nozick now? Those who are in favor mention favor. Those who are against just mention F or A. Those who are in favor mention F. Those who are against mention A. This particular point. Many of you who were in favor of Nozick in the previous slide have become against, because you have seen people going, people suffering, right? And people making profit out of the deaths, right? Same is with these ambulances. So what ambulance were doing, that I am not telling you, please take your patient in my ambulance. I am having ambulance. I'm going to take 1 lakh rupees to go from Delhi to, Ludhiana. There was an incident. So if you use Nozick in this way, the Nozick would put an Ashirwad on the honor of ambulance. Bete, mera pura saath hai tum. Meri theory to kehti hai. You are not taking money out of the pocket of others, right? You're offering them, right? And you are not acquiring something. This is already yours. Ambulance is already yours. But if you take a other look, this is against humanity. We have to find a rational ground to bring justice, right? That is why when Yukti asked, sir, are you in favor of Nozick? I said, no, I'm not thoroughly in favor of Nozick. But if some country has gained control over rare natural resources, depriving others of their legitimate share, his theory disapproves of it. For example, take a look of the issues which we are going to have in Arctic Council. So Arctic Council is in news because Slowly, other nations are taking their claims that this area is mine, because we have natural resources there. Consider a situation, China, gather influence in largest area of Arctic by using their maritime, might. Then Nozick said that is wrong, because that was the area, that was the natural resources were there, but your acquiring that particular area deprives others from their legitimate claim, because other Arctic, member nations are going to ask, but you are saying no, the whole point is mine. That is wrong. If there is a single source of water which is needed by all human beings, nobody has the right to take control into this control, like the example of Tala taking pipeline, right? So this way, you are going to elaborate on the views of Nozick, of third, rectification. Now, in the conclusion, you can say Nozick disapproves the progressive taxation. He termed it immoral or calls it akin to forced labor. For example, people being charged higher tax rate if they are rich. It involves voluntary transfer according to him. Tax to voluntary hona chahiye, according to Nozick. In contrast, Rawls' provision for the regulation. Now bring a contrast with Rawls. Rawls' provision of regulation of social economic inequalities on conditions giving greatest benefit to the least advantageous shows his genuine concern for justice. It means when Rawls is saying that we should give, greatest benefit to the least advantageous section, then only we can bring fairness. Then it shows that Rawls was genuinely concerned about justice. But Nozick's theory justice is not seen as a sound theory of justice. Actually, we can say that Nozick's theory is libertarian criticism of Rawls' theory of justice. Libertarian ideas, because when we say libertarian ideas, it means it talks about individual rights. Individual rights. So Nozick is talking about individual rights, not the whole concept of justice. Although we say that it's a theory of entitlement is concerned with justice. So at this point, I declare this session complete, and it was a great class. Thank you. So till then, keep learning, keep growing.